So welcome back, my friends. Today we are going to start another area of your CIA Part 2 syllabus, which is called information gathering. Okay, very simple and short area this one. In this area, basically we need to talk about 5 major contents. Okay, the first one will talk about the qualities of information. The second one will talk about sources and nature of information. Okay. The third one will talk about questionnaires. And then interviewing. And finally, other information gathering methods. Okay, other methods. So, when we talk about the 4 qualities of information, so you need to remember that as per the standards, basically IPPF standards, International Professional Practices Framework, information should have 4 qualities. Okay. So what are those 4 qualities? They are: number 1, sufficient; number 2, reliable. Okay, reliable. Number 3, relevant; and number 4, useful. Right? Now, internal auditors must identify information to achieve the objectives. Okay, this is the wording of the standards. Now, when you are going for audit, definitely you will come across different types of information. So you need to make sure that the information which you get should be sufficient, should be reliable, should be relevant, should be useful to achieve the engagement objectives. Getting it? What do you mean by engagement objectives? We have already covered in the previous session when we talk about engagement planning, internal audit planning. Remember? Now, examiner can ask you different types of questions from here. Okay. Examiner will say, okay, information is factual, information is adequate, and information is convincing. Any of these 3 words. What does it mean? Right? I mean the scenario will be information is factual, adequate, and convincing. Which of the following 4 qualities of information this relates to? So you need to select sufficient. So when you talk about sufficiency of information, it means the information is fact-based, it is adequate, it is convincing. Okay, so you need to remember these 3 major terminologies. Now, when you talk about the reliable information, it is the best attainable information. Okay, best attainable information through the use of appropriate techniques. So you know very well, during the engagement we apply different types of procedures. So through applying those procedures, the information which we get, the best attainable information which we get, is called reliable information. Like for example, when you send the bank confirmation request to the bank, and the bank will send you the bank confirmation that okay, this company has this much in the bank account. So this is what? This is reliable information. Getting it or not? So from reliability point of view, something which is coming from third party, for example, that will be more reliable or not? information which is coming from the client itself, it is not that much reliable, right or not? Similarly, original documents are more reliable, photocopies are less reliable, like that. So when you talk about the relevance, you need to make sure that the information which you are getting, is it supporting your engagement objectives or not, right? Like for example, if you talk about verifying inventory, okay, so you need some information pertaining to inventory, the existence of inventory, the accuracy of inventory, the valuation of inventory. But if you start getting some information relating to some other area which is not related to inventory, so you can say that this information is not relevant for me. Getting it? So, I mean, you asked the client, please send me some reports regarding chemical storage at your plant. Okay. They sent you the information pertaining to some other area which you are not auditing, for example, which is out of your scope. So what you will say? You will say, I don't need this information. This is not relevant for this engagement objective, engagement scope. It's not under my scope. Useful. This information helps the organization meet goals, right? So these are the 4 qualities of information which you should remember. Okay, must question in exam. Now, my friends, if we go further in detail, okay, because this is a very important area you need to remember. So here I am saying you that if I go in more detail, so you need to remember that sufficiency, this quality of the information, this is enhanced when samples are chosen using standard statistical methods. Okay, when you go for the audit, you use some sampling techniques, right? So there is a population of 1000 transactions and you need to select some sample out of it. So you need to make sure that the sample you select, is it sufficient or not? Getting my point? Because sample should be in such a way that you are convinced that, okay, I have selected a sample of 20 transactions. If these 20 transactions are correct, I mean proper supporting document and everything, I will assume that the remaining transactions are also okay, right? Depending on materiality level, depending on your judgment, you will select the transactions, right? So that sample should be convincing or not? Yes, it should be convincing. So this is what I'm talking about, that sufficiency is enhanced when you select a sample based on some statistical method, not just like that. You need to proper do this sampling of the population, and there is a separate topic of sampling coming ahead, so we will discuss in detail how to do sampling. Okay, now when we talk about the reliable information, like I wrote above, it is the best attainable information. Okay, so you need to remember, basically it is also, you can say, competent. I mean, examiner use these types of words. They will say information is competent. What does it mean? It is sufficient, reliable, relevant, or useful. Competent, right? This is the word, terminology. This is a synonym for reliable. Okay. Similarly, you can say free from error and bias. Free from error and bias. So when I say information is free from error and bias, again, it means it is reliable. These are different terminologies examiner will give you in the scenario, and he will ask you which of the following characteristic is talking about this one. So extremely important to understand the difference between these four. Okay. So my friends, when we talk about the reliability, let's go in more detail in reliability. Okay, let me put it below. So when you talk about reliability, so you need to remember that it is, like I told you before also, that information is more reliable when you get it from third party sources. Getting it? Information is more reliable. Information is more reliable if, okay, number one, you obtain it from independent sources. Okay, independent sources means outside of the company, third parties, right? Like you receive receivable confirmations, payable confirmation, bank confirmations, right? Like that. Number two, it is corroborated by other information. You know, you get some information and then you can link it with some other document, with some other information. So this is called corroborative evidence. Like for example, uh, you have come across one entry, okay, in which they have recorded payroll, right? Payroll in the accounting system. So there will be a total amount of payroll that, okay, during the month we paid 1 million salary, right? Now, how to corroborate it? Definitely you can check with the HR department, with the payroll department, about what is the background of this information, right? So payroll department can give you the number of hours of the labor, and HR department will give you what? The rates, how much salary we are paying to the labor, right? So you can corroborate it. My friends, the third one is direct. Okay. What do you mean by direct information? When you personally observed something. Okay. Internal auditors, personal observation. Instead of listening to someone, when you personally observe something yourself, that is more reliable or not? Right? Getting it? And original document instead of copy. So these four items are more reliable. Like I can say which information is less reliable now. So very simple. I obtain some information from the client. This is less reliable. I am not able to corroborate the evidence, link the evidence. This is less reliable. I am taking indirect evidence from listening, from other people are telling me, this is less reliable. And similarly, I am taking photocopies. This is less reliable. Okay. And then you already, I told you above that relevant is very simple actually. There is not much to talk ahead. It is relevant if it is supporting your objectives, and it is useful when the organization is able to meet the goals. Okay, please write yes in the chat box if you got the point. So moving on, let's talk about the sources and nature. See, we have done the first one, which is called qualities of information. This is done. Okay. Now we are going for the second topic, which is called sources and nature of information. Now, what can be the sources of information? For example, internal information, right? It can be internal, external information. It can be external, internal information. or it can be external information. Very interesting, right? Okay. Now, when I'm talking about internal information, so this is information which is originating as well as remaining with the client. Okay. Originating and remaining with client, like within the organization. It has nothing to do with outside parties. This is called internal information. For example, the payroll records, HR records, anything. Getting it? They are internal information. What about internal external information? It is originating with the client but also processed by external party. Right? Originating with client but it is processed externally also. For example, a check, you know, check. So when the organization makes a check, it originates from the client, but it goes to the bank, it is processed in the bank, right? So when the bank will accept the check and the check is paid off, it means this is what? This is the confirmation of its validity, for example, right? So what do you think? I mean, internal, external information is more reliable or not than internal information? Yes. So this is the level of reliability if you see. Okay, number one is the least reliable. Number two, more. Number three, then more than two. And then fourth is the most reliable information. Getting it? When I talk about external, internal, very simple. It originates externally, right? And processed internally, processed by client. Okay? Like for example, supplier invoices. Supplier invoice. It will come from outside, right? From the supplier. So, but it will be processed by the client internally as per the, they will compare with the delivery note, with the purchase order, and then they will pay. External information is created by, originates externally, right? And it is transmitted to internal auditors. So client is not involved actually. It is generated by some external party and directly sent to auditors. So there is no party involved in between. I mean, it will not route through the client. So when you get the confirmations from the bank, receivable, payable, they directly come to you. So they are called external information. Getting it? So my friend, this is the most reliable. This is what? Which is the most reliable? Examiner can ask you. This is the most reliable information. Okay? Because there is no one involved in between. Directly coming to you. Now, let's talk about some forms of legal evidence. Okay, what we are talking about? We are talking about forms of legal evidence. Okay, what we just discussed above, that was sources of information. Okay, this is what? This is sources of information. Now we are talking about forms of legal evidence. Nature of information, you can say also. Okay, so we are talking about nature of information. This is the main heading. And within nature of information, we are talking about forms of legal evidence. Number one, direct evidence. Number two, circumstantial evidence. Okay. Number 3, conclusive evidence. Number 4, corroborative evidence. Right? Now, what is the difference? Extremely important topic. So, when you talk about the direct evidence, in direct evidence, we don't have to make any assumptions. No need for any assumptions. This is called direct evidence. Okay. Like, for example, in the court of law, a person is coming and giving witness, testimony that this person has done this thing with me. This is what? This is direct evidence or not? Okay. So, testimony by a witness. For example, it's very clear. I mean, there is no need to make any assumption. The fact is established. This is called direct evidence. Okay, cash is short in the petty cash, maybe, right? So when you are checking the petty cash, the cash is short. This is direct evidence. Okay. Now, what is circumstantial evidence? The second one. Now, circumstances. I mean, this is an English word, circumstances. So something is leading to some other fact. Actually, something has happened which will lead to some other fact. This is called circumstantial evidence. Means because of this thing happened. Getting it? Okay. Like, for example, the sales prices are going down, for example, and we are investigating the decrease in sales, right? Decrease in sales or decrease in cost of sales. So maybe that is due to increase or decrease in selling prices, or increase or decrease in some cost of raw material or labor or some overheads, right? So circumstantial evidence will establish a fact that can lead to another fact. Okay. Like, from one, it's like from one point to another point you can reach. Like when these people, if you have seen these types of movies also, the investigators, they reach to the site where that accident has happened or something has happened, and then they look for facts which can lead them to the final conclusion. This is called circumstantial evidence, right? What about the conclusive evidence? Conclusive evidence is absolute proof by itself. It is absolute proof. Conclusive evidence. Okay. Like, for example, I mean, you are showing a video in the court of law showing that a person has murdered another person. What is this? This is conclusive evidence. I mean, there is no need for any other discussion. If in the video it is clear that the accused has killed another person, instead of taking a testimony from someone else, like a person is coming saying, yeah, I saw this person murdered this person, this is direct evidence. Getting it? But if you show a full-fledged video or CCTV footage, it's conclusive evidence, absolute proof. Getting the story? Okay. Corroborative evidence if you remember, we discussed above also about corroboration here, when I was telling you that uh, it can be verified from other sources. Remember this one, corroborated by other information. I told you, remember here this one. So corroborative evidence means it confirms a fact that can be confirmed from other evidence. Okay. So I mean, you can say that link link between two evidences, okay, or you are confirming another evidence, confirmation of other evidence, right? Like for example, you know, if you talk about the attendance system, so normally attendance, when you mark uh, at site, though for those people who work on site, okay, so some companies, they have established a mobile program. So when they go on a site, they use that program, and the program automatically takes the location, and the employee will sign in that I am at the location. Okay. Now what happened is, one employee is not coming at site. Okay, the team members, they know that this person is not coming, or this person is coming late, for example. But in the system, that person is regular, his attendance is coming. So when the HR people may, they sometimes they call the head at the site that this person is coming or not. So they got to know that this person is not coming. Even one day he came only in a month, but his attendance is complete. How possible? Hearing it. So this is corroborative evidence that this person was not coming. It means he was coming, or someone else was coming on his behalf and marking the attendance and leaving. And similarly, during the sign out time, someone was coming, or he was coming himself, signing out from the mobile phone and going. Getting the story. So this is corroborative evidence. They got to know from it, even they can check the CCTV footage also, that this employee is coming or not. So how possible attendance is coming? Getting the story. Now, my friends, we are talking about forms of audit evidence. Forms of audit evidence. Okay. So it can be physical information. Okay. It can be testimonial information. It can be documentary information. It can be analytical information, right? So what is the difference actually between among these four types of audit evidence? So when you talk about the physical information, this is the internal auditor's direct observation and inspection, right? For example, when you go to inspect the property, plant and equipment, inventory counting, all these things. So you can take photographs, maps, graphs, right? It will provide you physical information, right? So examiner can ask you, when physical information is the only information available, what should be done? One internal auditor should go alone, two internal auditors should go together to view it, or three auditors should go, or four auditors should go. These four options can come. Getting it? So answer is at least two auditors should go. together to watch it. Okay. When physical observation is the only information available, at least two auditors should view it. Okay, not one. This is you need to remember. What about the testimonial information? Written or spoken statement of client. Written or spoken statement of client. Now, client will give you this information definitely in response to your inquiries. You are doing some inquiries orally or by email, for example. So they will either respond you orally or by email. Getting it? So this is called testimonial information. Examiner can ask you, testimonial information is conclusive, true or false? Testimonial information is conclusive. Wrong. It is not conclusive. Okay. You need some other evidence to support the testimonial information. You cannot say that the client said this thing and this is our conclusion. No. You need to make sure you have proper evidence. Okay. It is not conclusive. You need to support it with some other information whenever possible. If not possible, definitely you have to use this testimony in your observation. Okay. What about documentary information? So anything which is in document, for example, some permanent form. Okay. Permanent form. Like for example, check invoices, shipping records, receiving reports, purchase orders. All these are documents, right? So whenever you are auditing, for example, some procurement department, you need these documents. You are going for HR department, you need personnel records. You need sales department, sales invoices, delivery notes, right? Getting the story? So documentary information can be internal or external, like we have seen above here. Remember, documents can originate from inside or outside, depends. The final one is called analytical information, where you consider the interrelationships among data. Okay. Definitely, because when you talk about analytical procedures, you are trying to find some relationships between different figures, right? Like for example, sales are increasing for what reason? Depreciation is increasing for what reason? Like that. So my friends, these are the four forms of audit evidence. Now, when we talk about level of persuasiveness of evidence, okay, level of persuasiveness of evidence, extremely important topic. So which one is the most persuasive evidence, if I ask you? Okay, which one is the most persuasive? So can you tell me which one is the most persuasive? I told you above also, if you remember.
External.
Yeah, that is information. Okay. I'm talking about here from the audit evidence, for example. Which one is the most persuasive evidence?
Physical or documentary.
Physical examination. What is the most persuasive form of evidence? Auditor's physical examination. When you physically examine something, that is the most persuasive form of evidence. Getting it? Then, if you talk about the next most persuasive. Okay, next most persuasive, next most you can say. So direct observation is the next most persuasive evidence. Okay, where you just observe. Physical examination means you are examining yourself. Like for example, you are doing inventory counting yourself. Observation is client is doing the inventory count and you are observing them. This is the next most persuasive evidence. Getting it? Now, after this one, these are the levels of persuasiveness. After this one, you can say the information coming from third party. This is the third most uh, persuasive evidence. Okay. Now, what is the least persuasive evidence? You can tell me easily. Clients' oral testimony. I mean something which they are saying by their mouth. Getting it? That is the least persuasive evidence. Okay. Clients' written testimony is somewhat persuasive. Getting it? You can see because they are writing something for you and they are giving you some confirmation. Normally we take some confirmations in external audit. At the end of external audit, we take some confirmation from management. Please confirm you have done this. So they will sign it. So that is client's written testimony. Somewhat persuasive, that is in documentary form. But the least persuasive is client's oral testimony. So these are the levels basically. I can say like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So mostly examiner will ask you about the most persuasive evidence. So you need to remember that the most one is physical examination of auditor and the least persuasive is client's oral testimony. Okay. Moving on, my friends, we will do the third one now. We are done with the sources and nature of information. Okay. The third one is questionnaire. So moving on with questionnaires, what do you mean by questionnaires? Okay. So normally the questionnaires are used when you are trying to obtain understanding of client internal controls. Okay. Which are normally used in the control self-assessment as well. Okay. So normally it is very structured. Okay. This questionnaire and detailed. So you can ask them to answer you yes or no. Like, do they have this type of control? Do they have the other type of control like that? Or short answer formats can also be there. Okay. Now, examiner can ask you what are the problems in questionnaires. Okay, what are the disadvantages? They can ask you which of the following is not a disadvantage or which of the following is a disadvantage like that. So the first problem is for questionnaire is that they are first of all difficult to prepare. Okay, you need some proper understanding of the system to prepare a questionnaire, right? Proper research. They are time consuming to administer. okay, to to circulate, to gather the information, to summarize the information, right? So the people to whom you are giving the questionnaire, so I mean respondents may lie or give insufficient information. Like you may have filled so many questionnaires in your life, and sometimes you lie also, or sometimes you give insufficient information in the questionnaire, right? Because there is a chance to be anonymous also. Anonymous, you can be anonymous. And the most important point is they are less effective than interviewing. So examiner can ask you, questionnaire is more effective than interviewing, true or false? So this is false, because interviewing is more effective than questionnaires. Remember this. Okay. So this is, I mean, overall idea about the questionnaires. Not much is there on questionnaires area. Now, when we talk about the interviewing, the fourth one. So interviewing is usually performed during preliminary survey phase. Okay, preliminary survey. So you are doing initial surveys to gather some information from the client. So you can use this technique, interviewing. So by doing interview, what you can obtain is, remember we talked about the testimonial evidence, right? This one. So you can get some written or spoken statements of the client during interview. Okay. So interview can help you with this type of information. Testimonial evidence. Examiner can ask you that which of the following evidence is normally coming through interview? Physical, testimonial, documentary, analytical. So the answer is what? Testimonial. Okay, this can be a question in exam. Now, my friends, you need to understand that there are some types of interviews. Okay, what are the types of interviews? There are mainly four types of interviews. Number one is called preliminary interview. Number two is called fact gathering interview. Then we have follow up interview. And finally, we have exit interview. We are talking about internal audit engagements point of view. Okay, we are not talking about job interviews here. Okay, so the types of interviews during your audit I am talking about. So when you go in the preliminary stage, definitely your objective is to gather some information, right? Uh, to establish rapport with the client, understand each other, talk about some initial, uh, I mean, how the audit will proceed forward, right? And you can ask them about your, maybe if you need some space to sit at the engagement client site, some computer system you want, some printer you want. So these types of discussions you can have during the preliminary interview, right? So main thing is about understanding the client and gathering some information, general information. Okay, so understand the client and gather general information. Now, When you talk about the fact gathering interview, now you go for specific details. Okay, you go for specific details. Now fact gathering interview can be in relating to a particular area. For example, you ask them, I want to have an interview with the commercial team, you know, or you said, I want to have an interview with the risk management team, for example. So they only those people will be there. They can give you some presentations. You can ask them some specific details. Getting the story? So that is fact gathering interview. I mean, not everyone will be present in every interview, right? So there can be multiple fact gathering interviews. Okay. What about follow up interview? Now you after you have done the fact gathering, you will do some workings, and later on, if you have some questions, you can ask them to meet again. That is a follow up interview, right? So this is basically intended to answer questions raised during the fact gathering interview. Okay. Now finally you are going to close the audit, so you will move towards exit interview. Okay, where you will sit with them, you will discuss with them your observations, your conclusions. Maybe an observation which you think is an observation is really not an observation. Getting it? So the client can give you some justification, some document which they did not give you before, right? So it is very important to have an exit interview. And what is the benefit of exit interview? It ensures the accuracy of conclusions, findings, recommendations. Okay. So you can discuss with them before leaving the client place. You should do this exit interview. You should discuss with them what issues you found and do they agree with that before sending the initial draft report. Getting the story, everyone? So when you talk about the fifth area here, other methods, okay, information gathering methods. So let us discuss about some other methods also. Like for example, we have observation and we have internal surveys. Okay. So when you talk about observation, we already discussed above about observation, by the way, here. Remember, physical information, right? So when you do some observation, you get some physical information, which is a type of audit evidence, right? And this is the next most persuasive evidence if you do direct observation. I mean, you watch some activity done by the employee, you observe it only. Getting it? Now, the problem is observations, they are limited, right? Why? Because when you are observing something, the person who is being observed, he will act in a different way, right or not? So this is a limitation of observation, that the people who are being observed, they will behave differently. Okay. So basically, you need to remember this is most persuasive for the existence and occurrence assertion. I mean to say that when you observe, for example, inventory count, so you can see that, okay, uh, the inventory exists. Okay, so observation is important over there. Similarly, you are observing a process, that how the sales transaction this is routing through the system. Okay, so it will give you a picture about occurrence, assertion also, that did it really occur or not. Or maybe you can visit the area where the goods are dispatched. So from there you can also see that the sales occurred or not. Getting the story? Occurrence. Similarly, you know very well that observation has a limitation, that you cannot observe private behavior, right? Attitudes, feelings, motives cannot be observed. This is a limitation, right? When you talk about internal surveys, like you can roll out an internal questionnaire through email, internal survey about the employee satisfaction, for example, or any other thing. So first of all, they are cheap. Okay, and the good thing is they eliminate interviewer bias. Okay, because it's a survey. I mean, it's not about you are interviewing someone and you are drawing conclusions from their responses. No, it's a survey. People will give their input and you can combine them together. How? Because you are able to gather large amount of information. Okay. So these are the good things here about internal service. What are the problems of service? That you cannot be flexible. It's inflexible. I mean, whatever questions are there in the survey, you can only expect answers from those questions. Because in interview, sometimes you can ask different questions also, depending on the discussion going on with the interviewee, right? Another problem is they have slow response rate. I mean, not everyone will reply, or they will take a lot of time to reply you. And sometimes, the organization send reminders that please, those who have not responded to the survey, kindly respond before this date and this time, and now this I was talking about mail service. Okay, this whole discussion I was doing about mail, when you send email. Okay, now if I talk about the telephone survey. So in telephone surveys, the good thing is that you can be flexible, because you are talking to someone, right? Flexible. And it can be rapid. You can take the data rapidly. I mean, you are calling employees, for example, and you're asking them about the uh, motivation, job motivation, or how much satisfied they are in the company, for example, right? But over here, there can be interviewer bias. Opposite thing from here you can take. There is interviewer bias. Okay, this is the good thing here, and this is the bad thing here. And they are more costly here, because more effort and time is involved, and the data will be less data as compared to mail service. Getting it? So examiner can ask you uh, the difference here. Okay, they can say that very simple question, but a challenging one. They can say telephone surveys are costly as compared to internal surveys. True, right? Telephone surveys are more flexible as compared to mail surveys. True. Like this, they can ask you, these types of questions will come. So please remember these points. They can ask you which of the following surveys have low response rate. So the answer is mail surveys. Which of the following has good response rate, rapid response, telephone surveys. Getting it? So like this, you can expect questions. So this was the area information gathering. Just let us recap what we studied. So we talked about the qualities of information. There are 4 qualities of information. Examiner can use all these different terminologies to test you. Okay. And then we talked about the sources of information. It can be internal, internal, external, external, internal, or external. The most reliable is external. Then we talked about 4 forms of legal evidence, right? Then we talked about 4 forms of audit evidence. And finally, we have the persuasiveness here, which is the most persuasive evidence, physical examination of auditor, which is the least persuasive, the client's oral testimony. Okay. Then what are questionnaires? What is interview? Good thing, bad thing, types of interviews, preliminary, fact gathering, follow up, exit. Other methods we have observation and internal surveys. Okay. So must this questions in exam, at least you can receive 5 to 10 MCQs easily from this chapter. So please focus and solve the MCQs to have a grip on this topic.